Hi, Jim. Hello, Dee. Hi, Anne Marie. Barbara and Doug, are you both on?
We're both on, but eating dinner, so you don't see us.
All right. We'll see you at dessert.
Hey, Jean, did you log in as the host?
I did not. Should I?
No.
Margaret, I can't remember where to log in.
You have to log in on your Yahoo address?
Yeah, I can't find the button on Zoom.
Hold on.
I'll forward the email to you.
No, I have the email for the meeting, obviously. It's the login. I'm gonna leave and find it.
Okay, the other thing I was gonna say is I might be able to find your host key pretty quickly and grab it. So hold on a second.
Okay. Well, as I live and breathe, it's Dee DeRoche.
Hey. Good
Long-time
evening,
no
Denise,
see.
Jim, Anne Marie, Jean, Margaret's there.
I'm sorry, I'm so clueless, Margaret.
Okay. There are ways around.
I'm generally a relatively, smart person.
Okay, let's see if I can grab host.
Oh, look, it says sign in as host. Hold on. Wait.
I can give it back to you, but I just claimed host. Where'd you go?
No, I don't want it. You have it.
Okay.
I don't want it.
Okay. Denise?
Yes, ma'am.
Why your name says UUA Presidential Search Committee?
Well, because I also have a code for that. I'll change it.
Okay. There might be one or two people here who don't know who you are.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Doesn't take much to confuse us.
That's true.
That is so true, Dee.
I change mine all the time and then I go back and it's not the right one.
Margaret, can you capture the chat for us?
I will try.
If anybody else is really good at it.
Yeah, it's become one of those Sunday morning things that has become an issue.
The one time I captured it for a meeting, it was like just a series of run-on.
Yeah, that's what that's how it looks. That's
God.
not going to change.
Okay.
And it's a pain in the neck to take it into Word and then paragraph.
Literally, you have to do that. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, some wonderful familiar names on coming up. This is great. All the stalwarts. Hi, Maze.
Hello.
Rogers. Yeah, awesome. Oh, thank goodness Joe Rupp logged on.
We'd have to make things up if he wasn't here. Roofs, we need them. They keep out the rain.
Joe, I just made you co-host, but if you want, I can run the PowerPoint and you can tell me when to move the pages. So.
Yeah, I'd prefer that actually.
Okay.
Hi, Louise.
Debbie, I'm sorry about the news on Cardinal, but not surprised.
Is that news?
Oh, they can't go into the school building, as you would expect. They're not allowing anyone into the building, so.
Are the students going to be there?
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Henrico County is doing the same thing. No volunteers in their schools this year.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Before you got logged on, Joe and Margaret decided that Margaret would advance the slides, if that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Reverend Jean, if I'm not mistaken, Reverend Sherman wanted to come, but he had a prior obligation.
He did. If you're a board person, you got a lot to do. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Reverend Jean.
I only get 12 people at a time. Got to work on this. Stands here. This is good.
Liz, are you and Margaret all set for who's going to, you gonna screen share?
I've got, yeah, she's already made me co-host.
Okay. Sounds like we got our ducks in a row.
Welcome, Liz Coit. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all. Or not to see you, but to know you're there.
Hello, Lynn. Welcome.
And Louise, thank you for bringing a pet.
Oh, she comes to many a meeting. Oops.
Denise, I think we could get started, and people can jump on when they're so moved.
Okay, sounds like a plan. I am so grateful for everybody who joined us tonight. If you have not had dinner and it's waiting for you nearby, please don't hesitate. You're in the family room with the rest of your family, and you can always eat in front of family. If you're comfortable going on, not having your video on while you eat your meal, that's fine too. And for those of you that haven't eaten yet, we'll try to make it crisp and to the point, so that you can get to that. We do, of course, need to do this by Zoom. We know that the Delta variant is still out there raging, and the last thing in the world that any of us wants is for somebody to come to church and then get sick and say, well, the only place I went to was church. So nobody wants to carry that around. So thank you for taking the time to do this through technology. We hope you'll learn some things that you didn't know before and maybe have been wondering for a very long time. We'll talk a little bit about questions and answers later, but if you will bear with us to get some information to you, keep yourselves on mute so that there's not a lot of background distraction, and we hope that you will find this useful and informative, and we'll appreciate any feedback you have about that. Before we actually begin with our presentations, I would be grateful for Reverend Jean to provide us some opening words.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. It's great to see you all here. And I'm going to start by lighting a chalice. And keeping that flame in the corner going. And read to you from Christine Painter. It's a poem called Vespers. The sun slides down the gap between the houses. Its amber reach crosses the grass towards me. Shadow of the elder tree has grown long, and I remember under the mulberry spectacle of sky how everything I love will end. This cup of tea with steam ascending, the dog curled right against me, your warm hands over mine, how this sweet leaving of day makes me draw the world as close as possible.
Thank you, Reverend Jean. The Capital Campaign Steering Committee is pleased to be co-sponsoring this informative event with the Board of Directors. I am a service co-chair along with Kevin Thrasher. Kevin, if you'd raise your hand, and you'll hear from Kevin in a minute. So one of the first things we as a steering committee realized was that we needed a consultant. It was just, we didn't have the understanding of capital campaigns, and they're more sophisticated than we thought when we started out. So we were fortunate to be able to engage the services of Ms. Liz Coit, who is with an organization called Stewardship for Us. You'll see it on her screen there. And it's a nonprofit that's affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist congregations. That's who they live to serve. And Liz has been beyond helpful to us in our work so far. She conducted something that is the basis of any campaign, a financial feasibility study. And the first thing we're going to do is have her speak. And Kevin, you're going to tell us what the second thing we determined we needed to do in our work.
Yeah, so the second thing we want to look at to get better information on what it will cost to replace the roof, which is one of our top tier priorities in the campaign, along with retiring debt. The original estimate that appeared in the resolution approved by the congregation was around $280,000. Steering committee, we discussed and we felt that there was a need there to verify the accuracy of this estimate. And for this, we worked with Reverend Sherman to appoint a task force on a roof replacement and clean energy improvements. Task force was comprised of church members with expertise in the related areas, and the report was submitted on July 1st. We're pleased to be able to offer you these summaries for both studies now. First, Liz Coit and Tom Norton and Joe Rupp, who co-chaired the task force, will be presenting their findings of the studies.
Denise, do you want to, would you like to explain how questions and suggestions are going to be fielded?
Yes, thank you, Anne-Marie. If you would, sorry about that, I forgot where I was. We know that there are going to be a lot of questions and certainly some suggestions. So many of you have been with us for so long and know the building and how we work very intimately. And we really want your feedback and your questions. Because of the number of people on the call and because we want to make sure that those of you who haven't eaten get to, and those of you who have to put people to bed, including yourselves, in order to make sure that happens in a timely manner. We want to capture all of your questions. Again, we won't have time to do that this evening, but please, please, please use the chat. We will be capturing the chat after the meeting is over. We'll get a hard copy, or we'll get the words anyway, might be online. And we will build a whole set of questions and answers for you to refer to. So please use that chat freely and promise to get back your responses back to you after the second meeting, which is on September the 2nd. So in 10 days or so. So Liz Coit, I'm gonna turn it over to you with a ton of thanks for getting us to this point, for your deep commitment, for your great foresight and knowledge, and for your inspiration that I know that you've brought to the Capital Campaign Steering Committee and to others of us. Thank you so much. I know there's still work to do, but we are so glad to have you with us.
Very glad to be here. You forget to mention how hard it was to walk around the lake with Anne Marie. I mean, she just dragged me around the lake. And then Reverend Jean took me to a diner and we sat in the back corner. And so, I mean, there have been some definite silver linings to this wonderful new group of people that I'm getting to know. I'm going to screen share, and I then won't see all of you, and you may not see all of folks. So keep an eye on the chat room as we go through this. And okay, screen sharing. I want to start with the last screen of my presentation. And I'm trying to get it. There we go. I want to just give a lot of thanks. First and foremost, Reverend Jean, you have some insights, and it was clearly shown your experience and your caring and your empathy shown during the canvasser training, which we did last week. You have a real sensitivity for campaigns, and I want to thank you for participating in that. It was great to have you with us. Also, Reverend Sherman Logan. And there are a lot of people to thank. There's such momentum. There's such good spirit. There are such wonderful people involved with this, not least of which were the people who welcomed me to their home or their Zoom screen to do the interviews. So I did want to start with this page, and I just feel so close to the steering committee itself. We've come a long way together. And I just want to say this actually started last fall. Yes, we were in lockdown, and actually the first call I got was in February 2020 before lockdown. And we've worked through campaign readiness even before the financial feasibility study and all the ingredients it takes to do a campaign. So we've been working at this for more than a year with real momentum and more confidence growing in the team and feeling really good. So, and the more we can get the word out about how important this is, the better off we all will be. So Denise, thank you for hosting this on behalf of the board. So now this is the last page. Now let's zip up to the first page. The feasibility study, I guess there's some blockage here. If you show nobody, you can see the rest of the screen. But the financial feasibility study comes at a point before you really launch a campaign. And it is to see if you really have, you have a need goal, and that was determined when you all voted in 2019 for a campaign for up to $2 million. But that's your need goal. This looks at your capacity goal and, what kind of money, what kind of commitment people can make from the congregation. So it is also an opportunity, and I really want to thank all the folks who prepared material for the capital campaign feasibility study, notably Deanna in making a beautiful case statement slideshow that I hope will be available on the campaign page of your website, which is a good place to go to find more information. So the information is starting to really gather on that cumulatively, and it starts with the Oscar-winning performances of Kevin and Anne Marie introducing the campaign. And from then on, we've got more material coming. And back when this was started as the feasibility study, we had original estimates from leftover from the original 2019 conversation about what was needed. And, you know, even today, we know the debt is a bit lower, but we know the roof costs are much higher, and you're going to see that soon. And capital replacement reserve is a necessity, whether it's built through a campaign or ongoing contributions. And robust human resources is really about, you know, what can I say? First UU is a signature church in our denomination. And it is in a place that not only is a teaching church, it is in the forefront of social justice, both symbolically, but also on the ground. And this congregation deserves to attract the best possible people for whatever positions you have coming, notably RE in music right now. So it's not about bolstering the annual budget for salaries. This is about special things that might make First UU even more attractive for the candidates that you want to have come to be a part of your staff. So it does play an important part. Who did I interview? Well, optimally, you're interviewing somewhere between 15 and 20% of a congregation. And what we did is we with Margaret at the helm of the various databases and invitation, and she was a wonderful partner in setting up these interviews with folks. At the end of the day, primarily because we really had to push to get folks to respond to emails and phone calls, and we got about 11% of the congregation to participate. But nonetheless, we were able to pull people of color and LGBTQ representation, as well as women and men, couples and individuals, young and old, people who've been there a long time, people who've been there less than a couple of years, who actually started during the pandemic. So there was a very representative sample in who participated in this financial feasibility study. Lots of positive overall sentiments I heard during this wonderful set of visits. And, you know, we did, when this was done, which was May primarily, the window had started to open. We thought we could come out the door from the pandemic. And so I visited half of the folks in person and half of the folks on Zoom. And I really want to thank the folks who welcomed me into their house wearing masks when needed. I was really happy. I saw some faces on the call this evening, and I want to thank you in person for welcoming me to your home. And all those people who sat in front of the Zoom in the evenings primarily with cats, dogs, kids, thank you so much for making the time for this. But these are some of the things that I heard. And what stood out for me was how important pastoral care and caring was. Obviously, the social justice is something you hear in a lot of UU churches, but First UU is closer to really feeling it in the gut and also feeling it with your feet. So it was really wonderful to feel that. And there's just a general pride about being a member of First UU, which will put you in good stead during a campaign and to attract more folks to come and join you. Key strengths. I love some of the expressions people said. You walk the talk, mobilize when needed. Historically, the moral conscience of Richmond. Well, whether you are or not, let's say it, man. Let's just do it. And there is passionate encouragement for activism from the top on down. Also, several people say, hey, if you need something, people will be there for you, which was really wonderful. And it's basic. Somebody actually said this, and I think it was true from my observations. It's basically a healthy congregation, working out conflicts, accepting versatility, being nimble, and you're welcoming. So keep on keeping on, folks. I asked folks I didn't actually ask what is your vision for 5 years from now. I asked people, if you left and came back in 5 years, what do you want to see happening? You know, what do you want to see there? So it becomes a little more personal and becomes more visual for them. You can, by the way, this slideshow will be available, and also Anne Marie, you can put in the chat room whether or not the full report is available and where and when. So I'll leave that to you. There is a full narrative report for which this is a summary presentation. Look at how people are thinking. They're thinking about kids, but they're thinking about kids being outside. I love somebody is rooting for the young people. Environmental justice, it's around the corner, folks. You have, if this summer's weather hasn't told us something, I don't know. The second one here, we will get beyond setting up committees by who you know, but rather be more intentional about how we design committees. And that goes along with thinking strategically and giving more credence to strategic planning, something I know Denise is taking very seriously as board president. So also as growing, let's keep, and I really do feel this from folks, the small groups really give people a sense of a known community. You can't know everybody in a church with 600 to 700 members, but you can know some people and find common ground and have affinity with lots of folks. There were some concerns raised, but if you read these, the underlying strength is there, Let's use our strength. Let's recognize we have it out of the pandemic, and let's use it to get together and look forward. There's some concern about people trying to imagine what virtual and in-person is going to look like. How is this going to play out? How will participation be for people? Good call out on the endowment. I certainly endorse this comment about the endowment not being large enough for a size church you are. And this little dialogue that was done, not as a dialogue, but different people. Baby boomers should contribute more to this campaign. They have more assets. And somebody else who's a baby boomer says it's time for a younger generation to take care of this church. We've given a lot over the years. My own takes is really that baby boomers need to contribute to this campaign big time. You actually do have more assets than the younger generation may be able to aspire to, if you really think about where they are in a world today with Social Security shrinking and job hopping being the name of the game. Not knowing whether there really is the money there to afford the campaign. But somebody saying, look, we're at the place we can really do this. It's time to do this. I think that's true. And a new person, I'm still getting to know the congregation. Good people, but sometimes a handful. There may be squawking, but this campaign has to do, it's imperative. I can see that. So if a new person can see that, that's really good eyesight. Campaign in general is affirmed by those I talked to. Most chose 10, which meant extremely important. NA here usually means that we ran out of time to ask this question. So when you see that, that's often there wasn't enough time. A lot of chatty folks, I'm happy to say, in these sets of interviews. But as you can see, the majority thought this was a pretty important thing to undertake now. Priorities, as Kevin mentioned, the roof is a priority, and most of the folks recognize that. Most mention priority, health and safety hazard. Some of it may need immediate attention and want to raise money as fast as we can for it. Paying off the debt, I love this. It will undermine everything we need to do now and in the future if we don't pay this off. Well, I do think it'll be a burden for future generations, and it would be good to get this out of your way. But, comments for each of them. And it was great, even the steering committee has from the beginning thought that, zero carbon footprint might be part of the roof, beginning with the roof work, but it was brought up independently in several interviews where people are thinking along the same lines. It's time for First UU with all its, renown in Richmond to show that it can also be a zero carbon footprint kind of place. Priorities refer. Well, here I took what people said they wanted as second choice and top choice, and you can see the roof and the debt were right up there, but there was a real strong representation for robust human resources, wanting to be able to attract the best people by making sure we can attract them with benefits or whatever. Okay, so this is the bottom line about this. When you see the full narrative report, you're going to see that there's such what I call capital campaign algebra that a lot of folks who work on capital campaigns use to determine from a representative sample what the entire church might be able to contribute to a campaign. And unlike some folks, I am the kind of campaign consultant that goes conservative. I don't want to throw an aggressive number out there that makes it seem that you might fail. There's no failure in campaigns. There should never be a sense of failure. But I start conservatively with every expectation that this church in particular can beat conservative estimates. So 100% of those interviewed will support the campaign. 95% were willing to specify a giving range, which I offered them. 5 were unsure at this time, but plan to give. The reasons for people being unsure tend to be, well, I'm heading into a transition in my life, like retirement, or young people have lost their job in the pandemic, but they do want to give. Or I've really got to talk to my partner or my spouse, my husband, my wife, a little bit more before I put any number out there. And one household had already made a complete gift. And there are several folks who've made partial or complete gifts, which is great. Okay, so by that algebra for a capital campaign, an attainable stretch goal is 951,595. And this stretch goal is 1.25 times what the annual gift income for fiscal year 2020 was. What you need for this campaign, if you're really going to get up to close to 2 million, is 2.5 times annual giving. And you need at least one gift of 10% of that, which would be, a lot of money, or 2 gifts of 5%. So here's the sticks. Otherwise, the campaign would be heavily dependent on those giving less than 5,000. In other words, the more folks that are paying at the higher level, the less folks, the burden doesn't fall on those who can afford less. And here's how it shakes down in terms of conservative estimated giving ranges. And you'll see the bulk of them are those who are thinking somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 payable over 3 years over and above their annual pledge. So those are the terms of the capital campaign: over and above annual pledging and payable over 3 years. So, and then you have some fairly people with ability to contribute at higher levels. And this was extraordinarily gratifying for me to hear there were folks, quite a few of them up here proportionally. And I suspect there will be more when we go to the general population of the congregation. This is a little bit more concerning, and we have to work at this as a team. What we try to look at is what is their campaign giving estimate as a multiplier of their annual pledging. So you'll see you do have some folks who are thinking of, they are thinking of giving 3 times as more or 2 times as more, but when the majority were putting out estimates that were less than their annual giving. And hopefully this will change over time as people gain more confidence in what they can give. And here is what we call an essential gifts chart. If you look at just this left side, I estimated that if you took their 385 giving households in FY20, let's say just 80% give, but there are friends outside. Let's say there's an estimate of getting 350 gifts. To reach anywhere near $2 million, this is a potential breakdown of the number of gifts at different levels that might be needed. And this table can be changed with time as more knowledge comes in about who's giving at different levels at the beginning. I'm certainly open to questions about that. I do think that the congregation will have to think about other ways of raising money, allies outside, potentially small grants, challenge and matching gifts from those who can afford to make them. Maybe the second year of the campaign, going out with some matching gift opportunities. Doing a push toward the end of the public phase. And that's okay. Now I'm going to open this back up. So I didn't have a timetable here, but I did project with Anne Marie that a timetable would go for the early giving this coming September. Now I know we have different concerns with the way the pandemic is and Delta is working, but I would say that a strong portion of some of the folks that were interviewed were ready and wanting to make a gift in this first year for tax purposes or personal purposes, and that an early gift phase would be an important thing to be doing for ourselves right now. And I'm going to stop sharing unless somebody wants me to go back to any slide. How do you want to do this, Denise or Anne Marie?
Well, you are right on time. Thank you. And I have put in the chat if somebody wants a copy of the full report, I've put in the address to write for that. So Denise, thank you, Liz. Fantastic summary of a whole lot of work.
As always, and I hope that you all will copy down that link, copy and paste that link, and take a look at the full report because it really has a lot of good detail. Liz, you did an amazing job, though, of summarizing the most important parts. Thank you so much. And please, your thoughts and your questions, get busy in that chat. I feel like I'm on the annual PBS fund drive. Call in now with your questions and your contribute. No, I'm kidding. Seriously though, use that chat because you may have ideas or questions that we haven't thought about. So any and all questions and comments are greatly appreciated. So now for the really juicy stuff. Whoever thought that a roof report would be interesting? Y'all, everyone that has heard this report, their jaws have dropped. So I know you're not going to get to see every single little detail that this committee worked on. This is an amazing piece of art that we are so grateful to have. So Joe and Tom, on behalf of all of us, once again, bravo for the great work. Thank you a million times. And show us what you got.
All right, thanks. So let's see, Margaret, are you able to show the slideshow?
Coming up, just a second.
Okay. I think we're going to go through this in sections. Tom is going to take the first couple slides to talk about the roof, the current state of the roof, and some feedback that we received from contractors that came out to visit our roof. If you go to the next slide, I think it shows the agenda here. I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change and net zero buildings and the opportunity that we have here to take a big first step towards the goal of net zero, and also what rooftop solar might look like on first you use roof. And then we are going to talk a little bit about the exact scope of the job that is on the table, and then our recommended plan. So I am going to turn it over to Tom. And if you want to go to the next slide, Margaret.
Okay, well, thank you. So Joe and I co-chaired this subcommittee, and we split it up. so that each of us took a major section. So I had my team had the roof, and then Joe's team had the solar and the energy portion of it. So Joel introduced his team, but on my team I had Reggie Henderson and Michael Gibson. So the three of us brought in several contractors. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the background of the roof, it's the current roof is about 25 years old. The first one was replaced, we think in about 95, but we couldn't find records on that to verify. There are multiple water leaks, as many of you know. There's pooling water on the roof itself, so it doesn't drain, which is also detrimental ultimately to the roof. So water doesn't go away, stays on until it evaporates. There's window trim around what are called the clear story windows, which are the windows that you look up at when you're walking through the building. Not in the Great Hall, but in the rest of the building as you go through and you look up, there's an architectural feature called a clear story window, which allows you to see, out to the sky. Those are compromised, rotting, and have to be replaced as part of the scope of the project. And then lastly, there's side paneling on the opposite side of those clear story windows that's in the same kind of condition. So if you go to the next slide. A few pictures that we took while we were up with the contractors. So these are some examples of the pooling water that was mentioned, where even though it's a flat roof, it's not technically flat, it's still sloped so that water will drain to the drain points. And if that is not sloped properly, the water can't go anywhere. It pools, forms dirt. The dirt eventually gets ground in just over time, not because anybody's necessarily stepping on it, but just in general, it just is detrimental to the roof and it wears it down. So the next slide. This is a picture or two pictures of the clear story windows from the outside on the roof. And you kind of have to look closely. It's a little small on the screen, but you can see that the trim boards around the windows are peeling away from the building. And the paint, is gone and they're rotting. And so what's happening here is that even though this is not the roof itself, water's coming in around that trim that's failed and is compromised, and then getting into the building or getting under the roof and traveling to a place to get inside the building. So the next slide, please. And then opposite the clear story, we mentioned paneling. So this is what you're looking at here is the paneling. In same story. You can see that it's at the end of its life, actually past its useful life, and so it's compromised, rotten, and lets water in, and again contributes to the leaks. So the next slide. We brought out 3 roofing contractors and then a few subcontractors for things like the windows and the like. All 3 roofing contractors confirmed that this is a full replacement of a roof. It's not a repair or a patch. So there are some jobs that I've been involved with where you can replace the roof. You can actually coat over the existing roof, so it's effectively called a repair. This is not one of those cases. So this is one where the roof and the insulation underneath it needs to be removed down to the deck and brand new roof put on. Second bullet is, as alluded to in the pictures, it's more than simply a roof skin. It's a full building envelope, meaning we've got to take care of the other things contributing to the leaks, which are the windows, the trim around the windows, and the paneling. And then lastly, the third bullet, again, we've got to take care of the taper and do the quality control when we execute the job, to ensure that the taper is designed in to begin with, and then quality control during the project to make sure that the taper is installed correctly so we don't have water pooling again with the new one. On to the next slide.
All right. Thanks, Tom. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about climate emissions in our facility. So I was the chair of the clean energy portion of the task force, and I was accompanied by Charles Garina and Michael Testerman. And we were able to really take advantage of this opportunity to investigate, get a complete understanding of the climate impact that our current facility has, and also better understand the opportunities we have to address that, both in this project that is sitting on the table right now, and also some of the things that we as a congregation need to tackle over the course of the next 10 to 15 years if we are going to get serious about achieving net zero and eliminating our carbon emissions. So the first thing that I want to talk about is really, if you go to the next slide, why we as a faith community are called to act on this. So, as you use, we acknowledge the interdependent web of life, and we are called to protect the planet as we know it. And the reality is that climate change, you've probably heard it before, but it is true that it's the most profound ecological threat in the history of humankind. The events that we've witnessed this summer, from intense heat waves to hurricanes in the Northeast, these are going to become more common. Fire seasons are going to become more severe. Food and water shortages are going to ravage huge swaths of the globe. Species are going to lose habitat and go extinct. So, without exception, climate change presents the greatest test of our church's commitment to the seventh principle. But climate change is also a social justice issue. And I think this is important for us to really grapple with, because we do pride ourselves, rightfully so, in acting on social justice and prioritizing that. The fact of the matter is that the impacts of climate change, they're going to be felt everywhere, but the global poor will be hurt the most from climate change, despite being the people who are least responsible for having caused it. So since the Industrial Revolution, the developed world has produced 79% of all historic carbon emissions. But poor people living in tropical countries are more exposed to storms and extreme weather. Their housing and their infrastructure is weaker, and poor across the globe, even here in the United States, have less savings and insurance to fall back on when disaster strikes. So this is an issue of ecological justice. This is an issue of economic justice, of intergenerational justice too, as we think about what kind of planet and world we want our children to inherit, and also one of social justice. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about, how does this relate to our facility? Well, the fact of the matter is that our building, the way that it is constructed and the way that it is powered and the way that it is heated, contributes to climate change. So our facility generated 134,000 kilowatt hours of electricity over the 12 months preceding the pandemic. That electrical use alone equates to roughly 11.5 average US homes. And electricity in and of itself is not a bad thing, but because Dominion Power, who we get our electricity from, produces the majority of its electricity by burning coal and gas, we in turn are burning a lot of fossil fuels in order to turn on our lights in our facility. The other way that we contribute to carbon emissions in our church is that we heat our church through natural gas. So we have 14 heating units. If you go back at a later point and look at that aerial view of the roof, you will see little specks on the roof, and those are our heating units. There are 14 of them, and 10 of those 14 use natural gas to heat. That means that we are burning fossil fuels to heat our facility, as opposed to, for example, using an electric heat pump. And then the last thing is that we're really inefficient with the electricity and the heat that we produce. We commissioned an energy audit. Actually, Michael Testerman deserves a lot of this credit. He organized an energy audit to be conducted on our facility. And what that found was that we are wasting a lot of the heat that we produce to warm our building and the cool air that we produce to cool our building. So those leaks that you saw in, those photos that we looked at earlier with Tom, that trim peeling back from the clear story window, that's not just letting water in, that is letting cool air and hot air out. And that means that we have to burn more gas and burn more coal to keep staying cool or to keep staying warm. So if we go to the next slide, what do we have to do about this? Well, I mean, the top line thing is that we have to reduce our emissions, and we eventually have to get to a point where we're producing none at all. It is important, though, to remember that we can't do this all at once. We need a long-term strategy. We need a goal, and that needs to be explicit and shared communally. But we do need to take advantage of opportunities when renovations and repairs and replacements are needed to take incremental steps towards that net zero goal. And really, this roof replacement is the biggest opportunity that we have had in the recent past as a congregation to take that step. And so we have intentionally included several components of the scope of this project that are designed to address and to knock down our emissions. So if you go to the next slide, I want to talk briefly about those components that are in the scope of this project. So the first thing that we are doing is we are incorporating additional high-grade insulation in the roof replacement. So insulation is, it helps us better retain cool air and warm air, and it improves what is called our energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is perhaps the least glamorous way to cut emissions, but it is one of the most effective, and it's one of the most cost-effective. So by spending a little bit more money on high-grade insulation, we're going to require less energy to heat and cool our building, and we're going to recoup those funds over the next couple of years through lower energy bills. The second thing that we want to include is we want to replace those clear story windows that we looked at with double panes. So double pane windows are also best practice when it comes to energy efficiency. We're not going to go around replacing every window in the building during this project, but we are going to need to replace those. And so we should replace them with the best thing that we can do to keep our cool and warm air inside. And then the last thing that we are wanting to do is to include the installation of a rooftop solar array in this project. Specifically, we are budgeting for an installation of an array over the Great Hall. The Great Hall is the most suitable section of our roof for an array installation because it's the kind of the largest uninterrupted level part of our roof. Again, if you go back and look at that first photo, you'll see there's all kinds of kind of turrets that hold the HVAC units and walls as things kind of go up and down on our roof. But over the Great Hall, it's nice and flat, which is a great place to put a large array of solar panels. And based on estimates that we got from solar installers that came on site to visit us, we expect that an array over the Great Hall would help us reduce our electrical use by about 30 to 40% from Dominion, and cost about $85,000 to install. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I do, I think out of, in order to honor the energy audit that Michael Testerman helped organize, I want to share with the congregation other steps that we can take outside of this project to reduce our carbon footprint. And I'm not going to walk through these in detail. I mostly want them here on this slideshow so that you can come back and look at what those options are and what we're really kind of faced with over the next 10 to 15 years as a congregation. But all of these fall into three categories of increasing our energy efficiency, transitioning off of gas as we heat our building and replacing it with electrical heat, and then sourcing that electricity from clean sources, be it solar or wind or what are called energy credits. So with that, I'm going to turn things back to Tom to kind of wrap this up and talk about the scope of the project and our specific budgetary and non-budgetary recommendations.
Okay, so the scope of the project includes obviously the replacement of the roof membrane itself with a modern membrane type product. As Joe mentioned, we would replace the insulation in any case. There's a very small incremental cost to go with a higher R value, what's called an ISO product for better energy efficiency. So that is in the scope. We would ensure that the roof is tapered correctly to the drain point. So there's a design that's submitted to the architect that shows how the taper is going to be achieved and how thick it's going to be at various points in the insulation itself. So that's key to the quality of the project. The deck, that when we remove the roof and the insulation, we will be down to looking at the underside of the, well, really the over the ceiling of what's in the building. It's sort of hard to describe, but that deck that you see if you're in the building and look up is a product called Tectum, and there are places where, because it's been compromised with water, it will need to be replaced. So we have an allowance in the project for that. I already mentioned we would replace the clear story windows. And again, very minor incremental upcharge to replace them with double pane if you're replacing them anyway. And then the fascia would be required to be replaced because it's part of the envelope to ensure water's not getting in the building. And as Joe mentioned, we would put solar above the Great Hall, and we've included funding to do that on permanent stanchions. So they're just little posts that the solar would rest on in order to separate it from the roof. So that in the next generation, 25 years from now, if the solar panels need replacement and the roof doesn't, or vice versa, there's a way to deal with that without a lot of rework and extra cost. So that's the scope. If you go to the next slide, I'll share the details of the estimate and how we constructed this number. But the two big chunks, of course, are the roof itself and all the associated envelope elements of that part of the scope, and that's $815,000. And then once the building is solar ready above the Great Hall, there's an $85,000 charge to install the solar panels themselves. Go to the next slide then, please. So this is the breakdown of the estimate. As I mentioned before, we went out and talked to 3 roofing contractors to get the roofing cost itself, which is the single biggest number in the estimate, of course, and that's the $350,000 element there. We had 1 written proposal, 2 verbal informal estimates from roofing contractors. The intent at this stage in the project was not to go out with a formal request for proposal with a specification and the like, because we're not at a point where we're anywhere near ready to award a contract. So this is considered a budget estimate that we were asking for. Nevertheless, 1 contractor did give us a written proposal. And again, they all came in roughly in the 350 range. So we felt pretty good about that. So that's the roof skin, if you think of it that way itself. And then the other elements that we talked about earlier, we're going to add insulation. So there's the edges of the roof are going to be thicker, if you will. You won't notice it when you're looking at the building. But for the installation, those edges would need to be built up, and there's a linear cost per foot that was provided. And then we just took the perimeter of the building and did the math and came up with that number. Likewise, I mentioned that some of the deck, the Tectum deck, would have to be replaced. That was a little harder to come up with, but we took a percentage of the square foot of the roof and applied a unit price that was given by one of the contractors to replace that. And again, did the square footage calculation, came up with the the $10,000. The clear story windows, we had a couple of quotes from subcontractors that do window work in the 50, 55, 60 kind of range. So that validated the window portion of the project. The fascia is a true allowance. We didn't have a direct proposal. None of these contractors are being paid at this point to provide services. So that was kind of beyond the scope of what they could do at this phase, but we know it's not going to be zero. So we have an allowance in for that. The solar ready stanchions over the Great Hall do add some cost. So we did a $5 a square foot upcharge for that portion, and that's just over the Great Hall. That's the $20,000 element. The solar panels, I mentioned, Joe and his team got a quote on for 85. So that's a direct quote. An architect and or construction manager would be required in order to do this work. If this were a pure repair or just a roof, a subcommittee at the church, might be able to run it without an architect, but there are too many elements of this to go into this without a design and without a scope. So actually we would save money by having an architect do a spec and a scope on this, and be a third-party quality control person for us to ensure we're getting a quality job and getting what we're paying for. So there's $100,000 in there for the construction manager and architect. And then the big question on this was what to do with escalation and contingency. I kind of work in this business. I work for the Federal Reserve Bank, and I lead the project management office. And we actually did the roof on the Federal Reserve about 2-3 years ago, and as well as a lot of other architectural type jobs. And so we work with estimators, and I've asked them what's going on with the construction materials market this year. And this year, they're estimating a 7% increase in construction materials. And then it's dropping to 4% and then 3%, and kind of working its way back to what's been more normal over the last few years of 2.5%, maybe 2%. So there's quite a bit of escalation going on in the market. And so the question was, these are 2021 prices we have here. What's it going to be when we raise the money, do the design, actually issue a contract? It's definitely going to be more than what we're looking at today. So we need to include some escalation. So we did that. There's also uncertainty. I mentioned these are budget grade numbers. These are we don't have a design and a hard money bid. So there's also an amount of contingency that needs to be included. And we felt that the two of those combined ought to be 33%, or a third of what's above on this estimate number. And then, you add it up and brings us up to the 900,000. So go on to the next slide. So the budgetary recommendations are to budget the 900,000 in total for the roof and the solar portions of this capital campaign, 815 for the roof, 85 for the panels. And then from a project execution standpoint, there's a couple of non-budgetary recommendations, one of which is to request that the board reconstitute the Strategic Facilities Committee, which is more of a facilities oversight group. And then that group would form a subcommittee specifically to oversee this project. So there'd be 3 main elements to the scope of the project. There'd be the contractor that we hire to actually do the work. There would be the architect to answer questions about this, prepare the scope and answer questions about the scope, and make periodic site reviews to ensure we're getting, what's designed and what we paid for. And then the third leg of that is the subcommittee, which would likely be a group of experienced people who have experience doing this, who could call for inspection points and kind of know how to execute a project, and make sure that we get a good quality job that's going to last for a long time. Go on to the next slide. Okay, and I mentioned team members. I think Joe and I both did. we already talked about who our team members were. And I don't recall if that's the end of the slide deck.
That's it.
I believe it is. All right.
What did I tell you? Work of art, right? Yeah, bravo. We could all take a lesson on really how to make something like a roof become a work of art. So again, thank you all so very much for this great work. We've gotten some great questions in the chat, and Anne-Marie and Kevin are collecting all of those. And as I said, we're gonna get back to you once we've had the next meeting so that we can answer everybody's questions at once. We do have just a few minutes left before it's bath time and bedtime. So how does this leave you all feeling? What are some of your, as opposed to your questions, what is exciting? What is concerning? What's on your mind? And if you'll raise your hand, if you'll use the little hand raiser thingy, icon, not thingy, icon, that you can find on my iPad, there's 3 little dots that say more. And if you click there at the very bottom, you'll see some icons and you'll see a raised hand. That's probably the best way. Margaret, maybe, and Anne-Marie, maybe you could help me keep an eye out.
Yeah, the other thing is when someone uses that icon to raise their hand, it immediately pops them up into the upper left corner of the first screen. So,
okay.
So yes, Jim Armstrong has raised his hand.
All right, Jim Armstrong.
Thank you. Given a project I've been working on that you'll see the final outcome of tomorrow, I want to say I really, really appreciate the committee's grounding this work in our principles. I really thank you for holding those things up out loud. I also want to hold up that environmental justice is also a work involving racial justice and anti-oppression and anti-racism. So thank you for that. I think that was a really important inclusion in your report.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Steve Sussman has his hand. No, he's saying he agrees.
Other comments? What's exciting? What are you worried about?
Anyone ready to fund it today?
I was going to say, you don't have to wait until an official kickoff. I mean, in all seriousness, if you are moved to do so, contact Anne-Marie or Kevin and let them know. And if there's something that you need to talk about, you know, the arrangements that you need to make or help that you need or questions that you need answered before you jump in with both feet, it is not too soon to do that. And you saw the work that Liz provided, which is so important. I really believe that we can do better than our capacity. Somebody dropped their dinner, sorry. Dinner's gone. I really believe that we can do more. We did more 10 years ago, or however long it was, in our last capital campaign. And I know how this congregation has behaved when there has been a need. Last year, just in the past church year, when the pandemic really bore down on us, this congregation came through like I don't know, like what? Warriors. We'll say warriors. And, you know, we met our budget and exceeded it. We met our aspirational goal. There's any number of times that this congregation has risen up to the call. And I just know in my heart that we can do it this time.
We have another hand raised, Denise. The screen says Autumn Fair, but it looks an awful lot more like Jeff Stutzman.
Hi, yes, you get the cheap version of there. Hi. Yeah, thanks. It was a great presentation and definitely some really bold ideas. And I guess when you're asking for kind of feelings and feedback on it, like my thought was like with bold ideas, we're gonna have to think about bold fundraising ideas as well. And I think just asking members and friends for money probably isn't gonna cut it. And so we're gonna just have to, I think, expand kind of how we would do fundraising and just consider some new options if we're going to do something as exciting as what's been put forth out there.
Thank you for that.
We also, Doug Jones is interested in speaking.
Yeah, just kind of a comment to Denise's point, the comment about stretch is well taken and understood, but from what I saw in the presentation, we're talking about a 100% additional stretch to get from $1 million to $2 million. Did I get those numbers right? From what we think we can do versus what we want.
You're a good math guy. We knew that about you. You're exactly right.
That seems like a tough place to start.
You know, hope is never tough. I agree. It's a huge stretch, but if we don't ask for people to give with their hearts, then how can we expect it to happen? And I won't be disappointed if we aren't able to reach that. But if we could do at least a good bit of everything that has been discussed, a lot of us will be really happy. So let's aspire. It costs us nothing to aspire.
And just follow up to that. So then I guess part of the process will be, how do we reconcile? Let's say we come in at a number in between, and now the roof is a much bigger piece of the total than we had at the beginning. How do we reconcile how that number, let's say it's $1.3 million, gets allocated?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that. Anne-Marie, you know, and Kevin, we've sort of gone back and forth about not doing all of the roof and spending all of the money on the roof and then moving to paying down the debt, but maybe some mixing and matching. Can either one of you want to speak to that probably more eloquently than I could?
No, one thing that we, from our discussions, yes, that's what we've talked about. It is the board decision. And as we raise the money, I'm sure the board will be looking for people's thoughts and advice on how this is sequenced and what gets raised and paid off exactly when. So yeah, it's a really key question, Doug, a really key question.
So, you know, for example, Doug, just to make it real, maybe we start with as much of the roof piece as we can do. I mean, don't want to do half the job and still have, you know, holes in the roof or what have you. But there's certainly a number of people, and you saw Liz's numbers, certainly a number of people who really feel very strongly about paying down the debt. So maybe we don't pay down all of the debt. Maybe we pay down a chunk of the debt. So we need to figure out as we go and hear from people where their heart is and how we should stage this.
Do you see that Reverend Jean has her hand up?
I do.
Yep. I just want to make sure that Doug's questions got answered. So we're good. All right, Reverend Jean.
I just wanted to remind everyone, we've had endeavors around the roof, actually, to raise money that weren't successful. So we've had times where there were leaks in the roof and people couldn't quite come together to get it done. So that's a reality. And we had who in our history have run campaigns over 5 times annual giving to build this building. And last time we ran a campaign that was 3 times. We asked for 5, but we got 3 times annual giving to do that renovation. So one of the things I want us to carry into this campaign is the recognition that we have the example of people feeling passionate about things. And I'll just say it for our household, we absolutely are going to get this roof done and debt paid down. And we are so excited about coming into alignment with our values around the green issues and the net zero that, you know, we're really motivated. So I actually think that we are going to put the question out there, and at first everyone's going to be, well, but this is the first campaign I've been in where congregants came to us and said, I know you haven't started talking about the campaign, but here's $15,000 for it. And that's the kind of action people have already taken. That tells me there's power here. And it tells me we shouldn't be afraid of going forward with a bold campaign. So, Doug, we're going to have to decide how to slice things, but I think the pie is going to be bigger than we imagine.
Liz?
Thank you. I had lengthy conversations with the very talented guy who helped run the campaign last time, Joe Kent. Tried to get some history before we launched into this new campaign. And one of his regrets was that it wasn't much more than 50% of the congregation that contributed in the campaign. And so what this going to happen this time is that there's two goals. One is the financial goal, and one is a participation goal. We're going to have two thermometers, or something a little more attractive than a thermometer, to really push participation. And for me, I like to say that I don't care if a RE class has a bake sale and raises $10, they're participating. And I think to concentrate on participation is also an important thing to do now, not only to really say, we believe we want to invest regardless of the level in the values that are about our earth, stewardship of the planet, and all that we can do about that. But it's also to say that any gift is worth it. Any gift is going to be worth. And so I really want to emphasize how important participation is. It's just really essential that all of you think about it, and it should help come back together in whatever the new post-pandemic world is going to be, is to really be there for each other in this campaign.
Thank you very much, Liz. You're awfully good at this. Yes, Anne-Marie.
I was clapping.
Oh, that's right. That is a different hand. Sorry. Can't tell my clapping hands from my raising hands. I think we're about out of time. So I do want to close this out. These are different times, folks, in so many ways. And some people are very well situated, given all of the circumstances. Other people are very tenuous, given the circumstances. There's been a lot of heartbreak, and there have been some glimmers of hope. But this is something we can aspire to. I'm just going to keep saying that and saying that. It's a different time. 10 or 15 years ago, the last time we focused on getting money for the roof, the climate crisis wasn't at the point that it's at today. Our folks who've been with us for a lot of years know that the roof has always been a problem. I'm in now 22 years, and I remember from the very beginning hearing about the leaking roof. So at least for 22 years. So our tenured members, our longer time members know of the importance of the roof as well as the debt. This is not the first time that the debt question has come around. And our younger and our newer members are so much more in tune with the social justice aspect, not only of being more climate conscious and energy conscious, but paying down that debt means that we will have more funds to go towards those things in our community that are the most important to us. So while paying off your mortgage, might be a good way to have a deed burning party, strategically, it's a much more vital part of our future. So there's that as well. And I hope everybody will sleep on this, think about it. And when you get the call or you get the email, you will have had ample time to consider your gift, as well as any questions or concerns that you might have. That's certainly at the top of the list of things that are important. Reverend Jean, I will ask for a closing reading along with my thanks to everyone who joined tonight and all of you who have worked so very hard to get us to this point. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It must have been the light slanting across veils of rain when this island, all gray stone and bare, became a vision in gold and gleam. Perhaps it was the smell of the sea whirling up the stony spine, gulls crisscross weaving a new story, or one more truly your own. Slowly, hundreds follow, seeking the way to light and water and stone, can remind them of elemental things, of how time suspends us as it travels. And we together are one, out on the tide, returning with the offerings, a reflection of the pools and the blue and the gold on shore. You no longer look through, but in.
You're sitting in the dark. Okay. So
thanks again, everyone.
So much.
Well, on behalf of the steering committee, we want to thank everybody for taking the time. This is a great turnout. We're having another one next Thursday. Tell your friends to come and hear this very important presentation, which will also be uploaded on our website when we finish the second one. If you like this kind of format, we are more than happy to use this as a way to continue to provide information to the congregation during the sequences of the capital campaign. So again, really appreciate it on the behalf of the steering committee, and you all have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.